All right, it's the last unit. We've made it to the last unit, and this one is pretty brief, only 7 parts. Um, and the first one was just a review of the Industrial Revolution. So we just did that in class. Didn't need to get into too many details. So this is good. This is a unit on industrial and economic development, patterns and processes. And today we're going to go over economic sectors and their patterns. So this will be pretty brief. You may recognize this image. This is some of the industry and that you will see if you're driving on the New Jersey Turnpike. Beautiful, beautiful. All right, so this is the idea that we can classify sectors of the economy, just like you classify different types of animals in your science class or numbers, whether they're rationals or integers or whatever in your math class. We're going to classify sectors of the economy. So there's 5. All right. Sometimes you may only hear 3 because 4 and 5 are a subsector of the third one. But for the sake of this, we're going to learn all 5. So the first we have is primary. That is the economic sector that extracts things from the earth. Um, Things like farming and agriculture, or even fishing, right? When I say the earth, that includes the water, think planet Earth. Getting minerals, right? Thinking of all these steel mines that are collapsing Route 80. What were they? They weren't necessarily steel. What kind of mines were they? What were they extracting? Whether was it iron ore? What was it? That's a primary sector economy when you're focused on extracting things. Maybe it's natural gas and oil, right? All those sorts of things. The secondary economy is the process of manufacturing those raw materials into something. So remember back in world history in US 1, we learned about like the raw material, say the cotton or the sugar, right, was taken from the Americas, and then England may have processed it into textiles or into rum, right? Taking something and making it into something else, that's a secondary economy, right? You're not just extracting the corn from the you're not just getting the corn. Maybe you're manufacturing it into high fructose corn syrup or ethanol gas or something like that. Maybe you're taking the oil and then you're making it in a refinery so that it can be used for gasoline. Okay. Tertiary is actual services. Um, I think I wrote that wrong. Um, oh, no, not really. I just need like a comma or something. Actual services provided that uh, utilize them. So maybe you work in an office to make sure that things get shipped to one place. Or maybe you help someone make their website for their company that serves something. It's often an office job, but not necessarily, right? Coordinary, think fire, FIRE. Finance, all those finance pros, insurance, real estate people, right? People that do things with OPM, other people's money, right? Hey, I'm going to put your money into a high yielding retirement account, whatever. We're going to get you a good mortgage rate. We're going to give you insurance for your car, right? You're using other people's money to make your money. That is the coordinary industry. So think the fourth, right? That is a subsection of tertiary. Right? It sounds like it should be like 3A and B, but it's whatever. That's what it. Someone decided this is how it goes. Then 5 is quinary, and this is basically any one. It's not really it can be a group, but it's mostly individuals that have a decision making capability that's high. So, like CEOs of a company, even people in government, right? People at the head of agencies, whether they're profits or nonprofits, right? Because it's even nonprofits still have an effect in the economy, right? So, quinary. Now, if you step back in a second, usually from 1 to 5, you would say you make more money. That is not always the case, right? You may have people that work in farming that make a lot of money. You may have people who are uh, in finance who might make more than a CEO of a certain company, right? So that's not like a hard rule, but it's usually that way. Also, as countries develop, they usually move from the primary to the secondary to the tertiary. Think a lot of how this relates to what's going on globally right now, and with the economy and with the changes we're seeing being done with the new administration, right? We started off, think of, Thomas Jefferson's goal as an agricultural country. We were a primary country. We industrialized, right? We're now into a service sector and beyond economy. All right. Why is that? All right. And so, just so you see here, this is a news article from, I think, just a few months ago that China, right, which is still a developing economy, is moving more into the tertiary economy and how that's helping their GDP, gross domestic product. So, like I said, we're in a part of the world where we're more service oriented, right? Other parts are more still primary or secondary, right? So, what the changes have a lot to do with changing costs, right? Labor costs are lower in other parts of the world than here in the United States. Any country that has an emerging economy is going to have a lower labor cost. You hear those stories of like poor souls getting paid like pennies a day to put together your cheap Shein clothing or whatever, right? Low labor costs. People in the United States are not going to work. It'd be illegal for them to work. If it happens in the United States, it is illegal to work for pennies a day, right? Transportation costs have also come down. So it doesn't cost as much to ship things from one to another. So it's easier for us to get goods from, say, China than it was years ago. So a break of bulk location is where things switch. It switches from an 18-wheeler to an Amazon van. I don't know. Or from a ship to a railway, from a railway to an 18-wheeler, right? So the AP videos actually had little cartoons, but we've all seen this before because we live in Jersey, right? You've seen this along the ports like in Newark and Elizabeth, things like this. This is really was like global changing, this technology, right? And my uncle used to work on these machines up there, right, that take the containers off the ships. Before container shipping, things would be in barrels, in boxes, and it took a lot more manual labor, right? Even if you had a forklift, right, and it wasn't just by hand, it took a long time to get things off the boats, and boats are a little bit smaller. Now, you basically have these 18-wheeler containers, and the machines pick them up, put them down, pick them up, put them right, and the 18-wheeler goes, right? So this really affects time. It really affects costs. So this completely changed the global economy. You want to know about that. Right? Lastly, we want to talk about where are things manufactured. Where things are manufactured, this is common sense. It's going to be where it costs the least amount to manufacture them. And the other models we've looked at in the previous units, we've looked at like hexagons and rings. This unit, we're going to think of triangle, and I'll show you one in a second. All right. So this Weber model all deals with wherever the cost to manufacture the good is the cheapest is where it will be produced. Right. Transportation costs used to be a prime concern. They're not as much anymore, but it's still a factor. So you can basically have something created where it's material oriented or market oriented. Material oriented means it's going to be produced where that raw material is close by. If you're going to take that corn and change it into ethanol, how far do you want to really ship the corn, right? As you process it, it gets lighter, right? Remember the whiskey rebellion? It was cheaper for the farmers in Pennsylvania to take their corn and convert it to whiskey because it was easier to ship the whiskey, right? That's the same idea. This hasn't changed. That is called bulk reducing, right? It's the size is less, it's lighter, it's easier to transport. Market oriented is when you you're going to manufacture something where it's closer to the buyer, right? Once it's made, it doesn't have to go far to go to market where someone's going to purchase it. That's bulk gaming, right? So these are both images from New Jersey, South and Central New Jersey, of ethanol processing, right? We know lots of corn is grown in the Midwest, but even out here, right? Where are you going to refine these things? Now, sometimes there's like environmental laws to take into account as well, but we see this all around us. So before you leave this nice short video, I want to show you an example when I said triangles, right? You'll see ones with like formulas like d squared and whatever. We don't need to actually do the math. If that's something that interests you and you want to look into it, go ahead. Well, I never put this full screen, but that's okay. Right, you'll see the different points, right? So the points is usually like where raw materials are made, where is it going to be produced, right? That's the factory. Where it's going to be manufactured. The market, it's where it's going to be sold, right? So if you see a triangle, think Weber theory, think manufacturing, think what's the most cost effective, right? You see circles, you're thinking the business districts. If you see the hexagons, you're thinking the growths of cities. All right, we got this.